significant progress with agric. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we used to spend tons and tons of very scarce foreign exchange to import rice, for example. In the last 7 to 8 years, there have been significant domestic investment in rice cultivation and rice milling, such that at a point in time, about 2 years ago, if my memory serves me right, reports suggest that we've now achieved domestic self-sufficiency. I'm also aware that there are significant push to raise what we are doing in the mining sector, because over and above oil and gas, Nigeria also has huge reserves of mining. And if you look at the current Minister of Mine, reports that I see, that I read, suggest that a lot is also going on there. But a number of these things, they are not short-term fixes. They are relatively medium to long-term. So if you look at what has been done, I believe the previous administration started a lot of work around mining by setting up the mining fund. And this current government has even, they've taken over that initiative and they are pushing it further. But mining takes a while for us to begin to feel the impact. So what am I saying? The journey into diversification is a journey that will take time. But as that journey started, the answer is yes. Again, look at the telecommunication sector that you referenced. Significant investment in ICT. If you look at the GDP split, you also see that telco company is now a significant contributor into the economy. So where we are today, is that the end? No, the answer is no. But is a journey to significantly grow the economy. Remember, out of what this government said when on assumption of power, is that they have a particular GDP in mind. So I believe that journey has commenced. We won't get there in a day, but the building blocks to get us there, I believe, is gradually they are being put in place.
Well, Dr. Adelito, some of the encouraging things that you have said so far are things that I've been hearing since I was a boy. And I do not know if those factors that did not make the interventions of the earlier years to work have been addressed by this administration. Now, I remember, and I'm sure you are very familiar with the Nigerian story along these lines, I remember austerity measures. I remember the second-tier foreign exchange market. I remember the structural adjustment program. All these, my question, why didn't all these measures, why didn't they work? And the measures and the factors that kept them from working. Now that we seem to be replicating the same things with different names, those factors that kept the earlier intervention from working, are they being addressed by this government? So that we do not begin to recall these current measures again with some kind of negative nostalgia, and asking the same question in the future, why didn't things work?
My read of the current, first and foremost, I do not think the economic thrust of the current, that is currently being pursued by the government, is a rehash of austerity measure or structural adjustment program. And again, as citizens, we are all in a hurry to get to where we believe we should be. But sometimes we fail to take cognizance of where we are coming from. The same policy of liberalization and empowering the private sector is what has opened up the telco sector, for example, is what is gradually opening up the power sector. The role of government essentially is to create an enabling environment that allows private capital to come in and for private enterprise to thrive. When you look at even in the oil and gas sector, 30 years ago, little or no local participation. Today, Nigerian firms, Nigerian oil companies are playing actively in that space. The implication really is the profit stays here, most of the spendings will happen here, and that spurs further growth. So like I said, the way I see it is, on an overall basis, broadly speaking, I agree with the direction in which this government is going. What we just need to do is for the government to keep its leg on the gas pedal to ensure that when you are driving and your leg is pounded on the gas pedal, you continue to accelerate. So when you accelerate, then the pace at which we are going to get to our destination becomes faster.
Okay, the World Bank projected that there will be a rise in poverty in Nigeria due to structural issues like resource dependence and economic fragility. The bank has also revised global poverty line, but its outlook to some nations indicated that poverty could worsen even with a positive GDP in non-oil sector because the growth is not inclusive. And the projections are based on factors like high inflation, vulnerability to external shocks, and regional inequality. How does this reflect?
So the operating word there is inclusive growth. And again, from the last administration to this administration, it's been reported that government has also been given cash transfers to support the weakest people in the within the economic space. That's number one. So that's part of poverty alleviation. Number two, this government has been pushing aggressively in supporting domestic production, especially SMEs. Because with SMEs, you can empower more people and they can employ more people. So whereas World Bank is projecting poverty, other countries, and I don't believe our country will be exception. I believe we have the people, we have the talent, have successfully pulled more of their citizens out of poverty. My own personal belief is, given the trajectory, we can also do exactly the same. And it's a combination of what we've spoken about. Agriculture is very important. Part of what has happened, and I'm not sure enough credit has been given for this, is with the withdrawal of subsidy on petroleum.
There, actually.
With the withdrawal of subsidy on petroleum subsidy, allowing the naira to find its level, people will tell you that the farmers, the small-scale farmers, are now getting returns that is at least commensurate with their effort. So part of what needs to happen is general price liberalization, which this government has started.
Price regulation?
No, not regulation, no. I didn't say liberalization. See, if you begin to regulate or over-regulate, because once you start jumping with regulation, the risk of over-regulation comes in. But what the liberalization of price, especially as it relates to withdrawal of subsidy on fuel, the FX, allowing the dollar, naira to find its level in the market as much as possible, is actually encouraging export. Cocoa farmers, and I know because my grandmother had a cocoa farm, and which my mom and our siblings have given out, and I've seen a significant increase in the returns that comes to them. I've also had the opportunity, again, I say to people, some of us might appear to be up there, but we are community, we are members of the community. So I have people, and actually I'm also a farmer, by the way. So I have a farm. I have a farm. I'm actually even expanding the acreage that we are cultivating. The price now going in the market has allowed more people. Suddenly, for example, I'll give you the example of what is happening to my grandmother's cocoa farm. On the back of the improved return, I sat down with my mom and her siblings, and I advised them, why don't you uproot this cocoa farm that was planted 40, 50 years ago and just replant? Know that for the next 2, 3 years, you probably will not have any cash return. But 3, 4 years down the line, when they start fruiting, then you're going to have much higher return. The reason why I offer that advice is because of what has happened. So a ton of cocoa now, because you've allowed the price of dollar to go to where it should be, so people are, and I've seen that all in several sectors where people are now actively trying to promote export.
Let's go to the agricultural sector and the economy. Of course, Nigeria has...
I mentioned the example of rice and how much has been achieved there. I'm also aware of several initiatives to push palm tree and palm oil production, because palm oil is extremely, it's not just what we use it to cook. It has a lot of industrial use. So things are moving, but are they moving at the right pace? The answer is probably no. So which was why I mentioned the issue of keeping our leg on the gas pedal to ensure, for me, if we can replicate the kind of work that we did around rice in other segments, subsector of the agric. So whether you're looking at cocoa and all this kind of thing. Recently, I think as part of the funeral procedure for late elder statesman, Haudogbe, former Minister of Agric, I saw some of his old clips. And you can't but marvel at how much has been done. But because a lot still needs to be done, so we can't sit here and shout eureka that we are there, because we still have a lot of ground to cover. But clearly, if we continue to move, agric needs to be done at industrial scale. And a lot of people are also not paying attention to what the president is trying to do around livestock. So if you notice, this government is also putting a lot of emphasis on livestock. I believe there's a Ministry of Livestock Development now. A relationship is also being forged with Brazil, where a couple of Brazilian successful livestock institutions or firms are planning to come and invest billions of dollars here. And if that happens, it's going to spur growth. Look at where we are today in terms of poultry. 50 years ago, we weren't there. So what we need to orchestrate carefully, and I believe with the kind of passion and energy that I believe that has been brought into this whole conversation around livestock. You know, I'm a vet. So even though I don't practice, I have a very good understanding of the livestock industry. If we are successfully in crafting and cracking the production of ruminant, by ruminant I mean cows, sheep, and goat, the way we've successfully cracked chicken and egg production, then the country will be in a much better place.
So, Dr. Adelumo, I was glad when you mentioned SMEs, small and medium enterprises. It looks to me like the banks are a very big problem when it comes to driving investments, small investments and SMEs. And how do I mean? Nigerian banks are hardly interested in funding or driving small-scale businesses. Rather, they seek to plow their seeds into the already established big investments. And not even with good intention. Well, it looks like that to me, not even with good intention. It looks as if the intention is to prime even those big businesses to fail, with the intention of eventually taking over whatever assets that a businessman or woman owns. So you've been in the banking industry, and these has been the ugly experiences of many people, especially people who are small-scale investors and the big-time investors, terms and conditions that eventually kill their businesses to the advantage of the banks. What do you think, Dr. Adelumo?
So, banks, you must realize that banks are, they are business enterprise. They are not owned, for the most part, by the government. So some people pool their capital together and they said, we want to be involved in the business of banking. And when you're in business, your motive is straightforward. You want to make profit. Now, having said that, don't also forget that in order to spur growth in specific sectors and subsectors, government has also set up various development banks. So you have Nigeria, there's Bank of Agric, for example. There's Nexim, Nigerian Export-Import Bank. So several, there's Bank of Industry that government has, they've been set up as specialized banks, owned by government, fully supported by government, to push certain agenda, most of them to spur growth in certain sectors. And what you will see is that the commercial banks who have pure profit motive. But again, let me qualify that, because every financial institution realizes that you need a growing business, a growing economy, for you to ensure that there's mutual benefit and mutual growth. So, whereas the specialized banks are established by government to support certain sectors, so when you look at Bank of Industry, for example, just as its name suggests, the whole essence of BOI is to allow support investment by the various sectors. So I will not agree with you that banks, and in fact, there's no empirical data that supports that banks, in fact, when businesses fail, there's no amount of recovery that we as bankers and the owners of bank can make that will replenish that money. Statistically, you only recover a fraction. Now, part of the issues with SMEs is capabilities. Sometimes the right skill set and capabilities are not there. But we've also seen SMEs that have grown. I'll give you a good example. Recently, I was abroad, and I needed to buy, I wanted a BCOS tea, a BCOS flower tea. And when they brought it for me, the first thing I always do is out of habit, is to look at where, I was very pleased when he said this tea was harvested in Jos, Plateau State. So, what you have seen, especially in the last 10 years, a number of SMEs have actually grown, and we're actually pulling our weight. I've seen, and I just use the example of tea, I've seen Nigerian products in many stores where they were displayed. And what that means, for your product for you to pick up Nigerian products off the shelf of a departmental store, let's say in the UK, for example, that means they pass the test of quality. Remember, we spoke about standard the first time. They've put in the right place to export. They've gone through some certification and everything. So the space has opened up. Some people have seized the opportunities. Some people are still struggling to seize the opportunity. But in all honesty, I'm not aware of any bank or banker who will set out to lend to someone with a view that the business will fail. Because no matter the level of recovery, you will not recover your principal and interest at 100%. So it's not, so you are better off. In fact, when we go into business, or when we are supporting businesses as bankers, what we want to see is their growth. Because from their growth, so if they borrow 100 million naira from you today, if the business keep growing, you hope that in another 3 years, rather than borrow 100 million, they will borrow 500 million.
Okay, so I've seen investors that have said that the T's and C's have primed them to fail from the start. And that it's also something like the Bretton Woods institutions, when they give developing nations these loans, they know that they will not make much out of it. And they sit there waiting for them to continue to hold them by the jugular when they default in their obligations to the Bretton Woods institution. So what I'm saying here is that the investors often blame the bank that they've been primed to default in their obligations to the bank through the terms and conditions that are killing the lending rates, for instance.
I was being banking and financial services and I'm still there, even though I'm not holding any formal role, for 31 years or so. And I can tell you, like I said, no bank or no banker will set out for you to fail ab initio. Because
officially.
No, whether officially or not officially, because if you set out, if your client fails, then you have also failed because you won't recover the money. You see, what is less reported?
You'll get his assets.
What you won't. So that's what I'm saying. So if I lend to you now and your business fails, most of your asset becomes scrap. So if I've lent you 100 million, I may not even recover up to 50 million. And statistically, I want to make this point. What is less reported is the number of bankers who have also lost their job on the back of poor credit decisions. So people don't get to see that. People also get sanctions. People's appointment in fact, when a big loan goes bad in most banks, there are consequences also for the staff. So there was no way you will set out for your customer not to be able to pay ab initio. I'm not aware of a single bank that would. In fact, is actually against our ethics as bankers.
Doctor, while we're still talking about SMEs, of course, distinguished members of the Fourth Estate of the Realm are also here with us in the studio, and they've also put up some questions. And one of them said that part of the pressing challenges facing some Nigerian SMEs is the fact that the access to finance. Apart from access to finance, they also talked about high interest rates and complex loan application, amongst others. So, of course, the question is, what is the way out of the SME, of course, to thrive, and of course, and buoyant enough to employ young Nigerians who are unemployed?
So, in the world of finance and banking, the inflation level in the economy drives the interest rate. So if your inflation is 20%, which is where I believe our inflation is now, and it's been coming down, it's part of the success stories that want us to give the central bank kudos for what they are doing. You cannot lend below. First and foremost, people will not bring their deposits to banks if they believe that the return you are going to give them is below the inflationary level. Because what that means is that in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, when they come back for their money will be worth less than, in terms of effective purchasing power, what they've put in. So the way to go about it is what the central bank is doing. Work on the inflation rate, for the inflation to come down, such that interest rates will follow. But for as long as you have high interest rates, there's no way banks will be able to lend at rates low. It's science. It's not even something that is up there. You can't lend. If you lend, in fact, people will not even bring deposit to you to lend out.
Do people still take deposit to bank these days?
Oh, yeah.
Because it seems like everybody's keeping their money away from the banks. You're taking your money to the bank. You're not, the interest is not even like you expect. So most days of taking the money to bank. So it seems like a lot of people use their money for businesses or spend their money on what they can see or keep it in their homes.
Exactly the point I was trying to make, Dr. Adedoto. People do not seem to be happy with the banks anymore. They deal with the banks as a matter of necessity, something you just have to do for certain reasons, for the ease of transacting business, not because they trust the banks.
You know, statistics doesn't support what you're saying, because if you look at banking reports, you could see that deposit keeps growing, which means people are going to the banks to put their money. Loans and advances also continue to grow. Although, again, you might want to bifurcate or, basically peel that number, wherein you are looking at, what are you giving to the large borrowers, smaller borrowers? But let me go back to the point around interest rate and access to credit. If you have a well-structured business, in truth, Baba Adegunwa saw the opportunity in the market. He put the right structure together. Today, Biggie Cola is an household name. And when you look at statistics, Biggie Cola is actually given
When
Coca-Cola.
we finish the program, I'll actually show you the way to our commercial department.
You-
because you are just advertising.
Okay, sorry about that. I mean, because I wanted to cite an example that brings home the point that when you have a business that is well structured, and the banks are comfortable with the way you have structured your business, money will flow in your direction. And I just use that one as an example. There are several examples all over. The problem comes when people don't make their businesses bankable. By bankable, what do I mean? As a banker, I go back to the point I made previously. When I'm loaning you 1 million naira. From day one, I must have a reasonable assurance that my 1 million naira plus my interest will come back. If from day one, you don't have the structure that assures me to come back, I will not lend to you. Don't forget, banks are businesses owned by some other people. They put their money there as shareholders. They also expect that you will not lose their capital and that you give them some decent level of return. When we put this in context, you understand where commercial banks are coming from. I go back to the point that government has set up specialized financial institutions like Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, to focus on specific areas of the economy and take certain risk that they know that the commercial banks would or may not be willing to take. A commercial bank, for example, would not want to take what we call in finance equity risk. Because equity means the stake that the owners have put in their businesses. When you look at some of these indigenous businesses, they are poorly capitalized. What that means is that in case of any shock, and shock can come from anywhere. Remember, nobody saw COVID coming. And the economy was shut down for 3, 4, 5 months, for example. Again, I make the point, even with such unexpected things, working with the central bank, banks stepped up during COVID, and we created what I call something during that time for them to survive, because we knew there was no way any businesses could have reasonably anticipated an event like COVID. So the truth of the matter is that banks are partners in development. Without a growing economy, the banks themselves, we can't grow.
Okay, let's look
Sorry, madam. Without a growing economy, banks, we can't grow. So banks, we thrived under a growing economy. And that's why bankers and banks, they support their clients to grow. Because when you grow, we will then grow. So
let's look at manufacturing companies. A lot of companies have shut down because of issues like electric power supply. The cost of electricity is also very high. And knowing that some of these discos don't even provide what they should provide, yet they increase tariff from time to time. Now, this is a major challenge facing the manufacturing company, and this will continue to affect our economy. What do you think government can do to help stabilize the economy, for manufacturers to thrive and for businesses to grow? Knowing that in the past, we used to have so many companies producing tires, wires. They're no longer in the country, they've moved. How can we sustain the manufacturing industry?
So, again, if you look at many industrial estates, especially in a place like Lagos, if you look at Agbara, or if you look at Lekki Free Trade Zone, there's gas availability. And with gas, industries can set up power plant of their own. I'm also aware, and I hope you are aware since you live here, there is excellency Governor Seyi Makinde has embarked on a project that will bring gas from Shagamu, I believe, down to Ibadan. The primary reason, and I was with His Excellency in London about 3 years ago, I believe, when he had this Oyo State interacting with various global investors. The whole essence of bringing gas down to Ibadan is that once we have gas back, once gas is available, then manufacturers can set up mini plants on their own. So they can take their destiny in their own hand. The primary reason why the Shagamu Exchange, if you look at that around Shagamu Exchange, the primary reason why that has become a hub of industry is because there's gas. So for me, I believe as for serious players, they themselves are positioning. That's one way that I believe government is doing the right things. At least I've seen what has happened in Lagos State, the same thing in Ogun State, and His Excellency is doing about the same thing. If you also look at the law relating to electricity, something fundamental has happened in the last 2-3 years. I believe towards the end of the last federal government, their last administration at the federal level, I believe a new law that allows the states to play significantly in the power, the electricity sector has been enacted.
Concurrent.
Exactly. So it's moved from exclusive list to the concurrent list. So that, again, is the right way to go. Some states have even gone ahead now to license power distributors in their state. So the right policy, and we're moving in the right direction. If you look at a state like Lagos, they have the critical mass. A state like Oyo State have the critical mass. So when states fully leverage this new legislation, again, it's going to help us to solve the problem. For me, I'm very optimistic for someone who grew up here, remembering that we used to have Leland, Exide battery, is it Isoglass, Chief Bodiama, who used to have I think a rug or a carpet manufacturing company, you know. So if we get gas down to Ibadan, which the governor is pursuing, then, and that's part of the governor's growth, economic industrialization agenda for the state. So, and I see different states doing different things. So my expectation is that in the next couple of years, the full implication of this initiative will be felt. Don't also forget that the federal government has been working over the last 3-4 years with Siemens, one of the global name in the power industry, to do certain things that will further reinforce distribution and transmission in Nigeria.
And now that you mentioned gas, CNG comes to mind. And what I've seen, Dr. Adeluto, the state governments, you also mentioned the state governments and the efforts of your state government regarding gas. But state governments across the federation do not seem to be very interested in CNG. By now, I believe we should have multiple CNG stations all over the states. If the state governments are also keen into this innovation, this initiative coming from the federal level, why are the governors seemingly not interested in the developing CNG?
Honestly, I haven't addressed my mind to this kind of issue, so it's difficult for me to comment. But for me, like I said, when you are thinking of the power sector, that change of legislation is a fundamental change. And like I said, it's basically in the last 3 years, and I don't even think we all fully realize the impact or potential impact. So it's now that people are taking advantage of it, that sector will no longer be the same, in my view, especially for states who are proactive in harnessing what the benefit that is expected from it. So for me, I'm optimistic that imagine a situation where a Lagos State, for example, is able to they've already licensed power distributor. And because those people are aware that they have a catchment in Lagos, they set up their own power plant. What it does invariably is that the power in the national grid suddenly become available to other parts of the country. So the full impact of that new legislation I expect that it will be extremely positive in terms of making power available. And once you have power availability, it will spur further economic growth.
Let's talk about our...
the banking sector again. And let's look at bank recapitalization and merger vis-a-vis the challenges that Nigerians face with commercial banks. I wanted to make comments about the recapitalization and merger, as well as the charges we experience from time to time, USSD charges. I've had an experience one day, I was trying to do a transaction via USSD. And trust me, the transaction did not go about 7 times, and 6 naira, 7 kobo was deducted the 7 times that transaction. Eventually, this transaction did not go, and such an amount of money had been deducted. That's an example of my case. Another bank recently was deducting 2,300 naira from my account for no reason. I've queried it, questioned it, no response has come. They've done that back to back, month on month. Now, what is responsible for these unwarranted deductions and nobody is answering questions?
So let me answer the first question on bank recapitalization. If you remember, 2004, 2005 was the last time when the central bank moved the base capital requirement for all the financial institutions. And if you remember the number then, and you anchor it on the dollar equivalent, because of devaluation of the naira that has happened over time, everybody, or let me say most senior bankers and finance people agreed that there was a need to request that banks should inject additional capital because banking is a global business, and capital is also a very important matrix by which the health of your banking sector is measured. And if devaluation and credit losses have basically eroded some part of that capital, they needed to be replenished. So it's something that I fully endorse. I believe is the right way to go. I also believe that for the kind of economic aspiration that the president is pushing, which is to become a $1 trillion economy, you will require stronger banks, larger banks, maybe not stronger, larger banks that will be able to support that sector. So for me, it's almost back to the proverb of our fathers. Tita, Lulu, Namankola, Tilabati Jinatan, Otititonton, which means there will be pains and noise at the beginning. But once it's stabilized, we'll all reap as a country. We'll all reap from the benefit. Okay, a quick comment on the charges. The central bank, in conjunction with the banks, but the authority lies solely with the central bank, but they normally receive input from the commercial banks. There's what is called banker's tariff. Banks comply with all the rules and regulations. And there's a central bank consumer protection unit. But I would say, as a banker, the starting point is for you to escalate within the bank. But I would be shocked if any licensed bank in Nigeria will deduct charges that are not allowed by the banker's tariff.
Okay, let's take the phone numbers. We have phone numbers to open the phone lines. 0708 682 5197. The numbers to call to join the conversation: 0907 160 6375. Those are the numbers to call for people to, of course, ask questions and possibly eulogize you.
Yes, the program is audience participatory, so our team audience would really love to engage you. And okay, having said that, Dr. Adeduto, I want us to talk about the issue of corruption in the Nigerian system and in the Nigerian, especially as it affects the Nigerian finance system. I find it strange that billions of dollars are being lost to corruption and non-accountability almost on a daily basis in Nigeria. And just this morning, it was in the dailies, the House of Reps, they said they were probing non-remittance of over $800 million in all sector funds. Okay, I think we have a caller on the line.
Yes. Hello?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Your name and where you are calling from?
Okay, call us back.
That.
The numbers are scrolling on the screen. Kindly call us back.
So I was talking about the matter of corruption, and I find it strange because the same system that would tell us that if they plow these same commensurate funds into education, into health, into various sectors where the key players are agitating for revitalization and better welfare, they will tell you that the economy will collapse. Yet, I have not seen the Nigerian economy collapse when a single individual steals as much as 90 billion naira of the nation's money, when $800 million fails to get remitted into the nation's coffers. What do you make of this?
So again, sometimes I like to separate facts from fiction. The comment you made about the House of Representatives, so it's still an allegation, for example, and you said they will go through a process to investigate. So investigation. So there's this principle of you have to assume that the accused person is innocent until it's proven in the competent court. Yeah. So my experience is a lot of noise, and you don't really get to see much in terms of so since it's already before the House of Representatives, my advice is that we should all wait patiently to allow them to complete their oversight function. Because sometimes, and I've seen this not once, not twice, there's also the problem of reconciliation. One data is with one agency, another data is with another agency. So when you call all the parties involved, you now discover that, what you think should have been remitted, and I'm just making it up, not that I know, which is why I said we should leave it, but I'm just talking from prior experiences, that sometimes it's pure reconciliation, sometimes it's misunderstanding between agencies and the people involved, And when parties, which is why democracy is beautiful. Because the whole essence of the hearing is that all parties will be there. You make your point, they make their point, everybody makes their point, and you now see where exactly lies the real fact. So I think it's a conversation. I mean, the example you cited depicts many things. We should just leave it, let the House of Representatives conclude their constitutional prescribed oversight responsibility, and then if there are people that are found guilty, then I'm sure they will know how to apply the appropriate remedial actions.
Okay, I want us to talk about democracy and the spate of coups in Africa. You mentioned democracy just now. Now, Madagascar has been the latest addition to the list. Now, have these changeovers reflected, how have they reflected on Africa's economic growth, especially West Africa? Remember, many of these men of the jackboot do hinge their actions on the exploitative policies of the Western Bretton Woods institutions and the Western nations.
We do have a caller.
We have a caller.
Yes, listen. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Guest of the Month. Okay.
Oh, we lost that again.
Please do call us back. The numbers are scrolling on the screen.
So many of them, those who initiate this changeovers, talking about the men of the jackboots, they hinge their action on the Western Bretton Woods institutions that they say perpetually impoverish the people. So the impact of these takeovers on the economy of Africa, West Africa especially?
I mean, the starting point for me is to repeat what I believe we were taught in school, and we've all seen it, that the worst democratic government is better than the most benevolent authoritarian regime.
People in West Africa, they are busy welcoming, I mean, in some West African countries, they are welcoming back the military with open arms.
So I'm coming to that.
Okay.
So again, we must treasure what we have in Nigeria since 1999. And we must continue to nurture it. We must continue to work towards it, building stronger institutions. So I must say, I'm happy that we are not part of that bandwagon, because when you ask the impact, in truth, I remember I spoke about this earlier on, that when sovereign risk analysts, the people who analyze risk of countries, it's almost like a no in today's world when you have military government, because by definition, a military government can repudiate even the best crafted legal agreements. So it's a red flag. It's almost like a no when you go to the global financing space, when you have a military government, especially in today's world. Having said that, again, you mentioned the fact that people are jubilating in some countries. Again, we understand these dynamics. So there's a coup in a country of 10 million people, and you organize 50,000 people to come and celebrate. People project. So sometimes what you see might not necessarily be representative of the true situations on ground. So again, by definition, because military dictatorship is, they use brute force. So nobody is coming out. Once they are successful, nobody can come out to protest, because again, we all see what used to happen during protests. So for me, I repeat, we must cherish the democracy that we have in Nigeria, which is what allows you and I to be able to express contrarian view to what the government is doing. There's plurality of parties. Another election is coming up in 2027 by the special grace of God, and people will have the opportunity to either endorse the incumbents in all the state or the federal and everything. And it's something we must cherish, and we all as citizens must keep on protecting that.
My question is not really about the merits or demerits of military rule. I'm talking about the global economic and finance implications for the West African nations, for instance, where this has taken place. We have seen some of the nations who are at cross purposes with the West coming out to give an economic shoulder to some of these countries. That's the area I want you to look at. The Russians and the Americans, for instance, and the French. The Russians especially, they seem to be giving that economic backbone to these West African countries. Are they the better for it financially? Are they the better for it economically? Especially considering what a country like Niger, for instance, has accused Mali, has accused the French of doing to their economy.
So I think I've answered that partially when I said, when people sit down to evaluate whether to invest in a country or not, a country, if I have options, let's say there are two countries, and one is under a democratic government, the other one is under a military dictatorship, there will be a markdown for that country that is under military dictatorship, and there will be a markup for the country that is under democracy. The way to put it really is, how much resources is even available to the country that you have mentioned that is backing certain countries? Not so much, because you need to look at their own GDP vis-a-vis the GDP, the global GDP. So, when you want to align, you better align with the right set of people, the people who can give you the necessary support. And the beauty of democracy is that it has virtually become the global standard. If we continue to do what we are doing in Nigeria, we'll become the capital will continue to come here because they know that there is rule of law. Because democracy is synonymous with rule of law. For those countries that have opted for whatever reason, it can only be a negative.
Okay.
That's just the truth.
I'm glad when you were speaking earlier about bank recapitalization, you actually gave your support to, bank recapitalization. But I'd like to ask, how will it benefit an average Nigerian? That's not it alone. This question is coming from some of our colleagues who are here. Of course, one also is worried about financing major sectors like maritime, power, telecoms, So, I mean, looking at the economy of this country, how would you say Nigerian banks have the capacity to finance the big sectors?
So it's very interesting. In that same question, the person that sent in the question invariably even answered the first part. The whole essence of enhancing the capital base of the banks is to give them more firepower to be able to finance bigger ticket transactions. There are rules that governs how much you can lend vis-a-vis the capital. So, and I'm just making it up. The rule could be, if your capital base is 1 billion, you cannot lend more than 10% of 1 billion, which is 100 million naira to another. So now that your capital base is 500 billion, for example, so suddenly a bank that could only lend 1 billion before could potentially lend what is 10% of 500 billion, which is now 50 billion. So it allows banks to be able to lend to bigger ticket transactions. Remember, I also said there's a linkage between the recapitalization requirement that was put forward by the central bank and the aspiration of the current leadership in the country, that's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that we want to become a $1 trillion economy. For you to get there, you actually require bigger, stronger banks, and the most important matrix to measure the size of bank, the strength of bank is around capital. So really, it's in synergy with the economic goal and objective of the president. And the way it's going to affect common man is when banks are able to finance bigger transactions. Those transactions are transactions that are here. So they will employ people, they will employ companies. Those companies will employ people. So we call it direct and indirect employment. And when you have that, there's a multiplier effect that it will have on the economy. Clearly, that is one policy that is very positive for the economy.
On the employment you just mentioned, that technology has taken over almost everything. So, I mean, in the face of technological development that we see today, almost like more than 50% of the workforce, I mean, how will that happen?
So there's first and foremost, technology has not taken over everything. There are areas where technology can't, at least for now, will not take over and cannot take over. So what you will see, and I remember when internet came newly, I remember when we all started using laptops, etc. The noise then was that, this will create unemployment. But they ended up creating new sets of employment. So what now becomes very important is for people to have what I call adaptable skills. Skills, they must be trainable. People must have imbibed the culture of continuous improvement. Because if you don't continuously improve yourself, the skill set that are relevant yesterday and today may no longer be relevant tomorrow, and you become unemployable. But if you continuously invest in yourself, you will acquire new skills that are relevant for tomorrow, next tomorrow, and that makes you to be employable. So retraining will become very important. But for the young generation that are just coming out of school, they are digital native. What do I mean by being digital native? They just like the way we met television, they just grew up seeing iPad, seeing all those digital tablets. In fact, there's no way my children, for example, will remember whoever imagined that we used to go to bank and you pick up a tally. And for 3-4 hours, you'll be waiting for somebody to call your tally number for you to go and draw cash. Many of them don't even need to go to banks to open an account. They open the account right on their phone. They are transacting. They haven't stepped into the bank. So the world has changed phenomenally. Has that reduced the number of employees in banks? The answer is no. It's just that you now have more people involved in product development. You have more people involved with technology work. So it's the nature of work that will change. And part of, and which is why, coincidentally, I'm the pro-chancellor and chair of the governing council of Abiola Ajimobi,
and that's what we're doing next.
Abiola Ajimobi Technical University. And our aim is essentially pushing STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and and mathematics. So the trick is we need to get more of our children to be in the growth sector, STEM being one of them. There are several sectors that will continue to grow. It doesn't diminish the importance of some of the other sectors. That doesn't mean you don't need lawyers, you don't need doctors or whatever, but technology will take a bit of it and then other people will move forward.
Okay, as a pro-chancellor...
sorry, before we go into the matter of Abiola Ajimobi Technical University and your involvement in the educational sector, I just want to ask this question, and that's taking you back to the energy sector. Dangote versus Pengasan. There are insinuations that there is more to it than these two unions merely protecting members' interests. Are you by any chance seeing some of the unpublishable embers of conflict here?
To be honest, I haven't paid much attention to that conflict. However, let me state that what Dangote has done by putting up Dangote refineries and petrochemical, that's an investment in excess of $20 billion. It's transformational. It's something that is much needed in this country. We actually need, or we require, more of such national icons in various sectors that can provide Nigeria. Because don't forget, and there's a linkage, sometimes we miss the bigger picture. There's this African Continental Free Trade Zone, which allows, because Africans, we trade less among ourselves, we trade more with outside. But the whole essence, they want us to trade more among ourselves. In another 10 years, when that thing is fully settled, what you want to do, what you want to have as a country, are what I call national icons who are basically providing goods and services to other parts of Africa. And you require anchor. So what I think about Dangote is that is one major anchor that this country has successfully built. We require more of such, and they require support. Having said that, I'm happy that government has successfully resolved that issue, and I don't think it's something we should dwell on. We should dwell more on how do we create more Dangotes in various sectors of the economy. That way, our GDP will grow, will provide employment to our people, and we become anchor across the continent. And the reward for the country will be tremendous. So I want to look at it from that lens, and that's the way how we see Dangote.
Okay, let's go to Abiola Ajimobi Technical University, situated here in Ibadan, Oyo State. Since you became the pro-chancellor of that institution, tell us the developments that has come to existence and the progress made so far?
So receive additional approvals from the National University Commission to offer additional courses from the university. But more fundamentally is the work we are doing to ensure that we expand and grow the university. As we are currently, we don't think we need to grow the student enrollment without compromising on quality and standard, which is very important. Build the university more to become part of what I said to the leadership team at the university is that we also need to attract more students from outside of your state so that the students that are going through education at the university, they also have national outlook. Because most of them currently, they are from here. So they all are most of them are their secondary primary education in Oyo State. And they're basically going to an Oyo State-owned university. But if we broaden and we make ourselves to appeal to broader student applicant population, we can bring in more Nigerians so that our people will be more national in outlook. So that's a project that is very important and very dear to the university. Expanding the scope of what we do now, significantly increasing the enrollment, and that also means we need to provide more infrastructure. So part of what we're trying to do is to have an endowment for the university that allows us to rapidly expand the infrastructure that is available. It's a beautiful location. We have the land on which we can rapidly put those infrastructure. And importantly, we have the support of His Excellency, who is the visitor to the university. That's Governor Seyi Makinde. So for me, all the critical ingredients are there. It's for us to now orchestrate it carefully and to achieve success. For me, I'm particular about education. If you look at my resume, I've been a member of Sigma Club Education Foundation for years. I believe education is that tool that we can use to significantly reduce poverty. To go back to the point that you made earlier on. And if there's anything that I believe could become a critical asset of our state, and indeed the country, is when you have this young population that we have in the country, if you give them solid education where they can hold their own anywhere in the world, the country, we won't even recognize our own country in another 10, 15 years when those people now have got into position. And that for me is why I'm involved in this project. That's education, education, education.
Abiola Ajimobi Technical University, I remember at inception, there were certain programs that made it possible for people like me without a deep pocket to send my children to that university. I don't know what is the scope of these programs now for maybe brilliant but indigent students at the university.
Again, that's part of the brilliant, and I must commend the initiator of the idea, late Governor Isiaka Abiola Ajimobi, and the current governor, His Excellency Governor, because he has basically continued the trend. In fact, he has expanded on it. There's a structure that allows the local government, all the local governments in Oyo State, to sponsor brilliant students from, in fact, it's almost like a commitment. Every year, each local government must send to the technical university X number of students. And that's working out. Typically, they are indigent students who are brilliant, who ordinarily may not have been able to afford to pay their fees, and we have them there. And the results have been fantastic. There have also been individuals, I won't name names, but a number of them from this state, including myself. Some have done it, some of us have started doing it. We've also appealed. I have appealed specifically to a number of senior, successful Oyo State indigenes that we need their support to help such people, because the list is, it's not as if we're able to meet their needs on an annual basis. So there's work that is ongoing now to further expand the scholarship base of the university so that we can admit more indigent students on merit who have the brain capacity to be able to cope with the rigors of the academics, and we believe they will go on to be something, and then we'll be very proud of them as indigene of this state.
Dr. Adeduto, do you have any reservations about the continued existence of the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board, JAMB? Many young admission seekers and parents are currently not very happy with them.
Honestly, because I went through that process in 1986, I haven't, and everything. I remember my admission letter was brought to me at home. I used to stay at my father's house then at Okearema, M4/481D, Okearema, Ibadan. So I haven't seen anything, maybe I haven't given it enough thought, but the fact that I've experienced it, the fact that I have wards that have also experienced it and it's been smooth as far as I'm concerned, I also trust the leadership of JAMB, by the way. I have a huge amount of respect for Professor Ishak Oloide, who's the registrar of JAMB. So he's an entity that I believe is doing the right things. Like everything, there's always merit and demerit, but on balance, from the little I've studied that institution, on balance, I believe the entity is needed and they're doing the right job. Don't also forget that in the last few years, there have also been some modification where the university also conduct the university's own tests just to ensure there's proper alignment.
That's why I asked that question.
So again, you can't be too sure anytime. But I think a combination of both gives us, at least from what I've seen, I think it's working.
Okay, let's look at the ongoing warning strike, but also the academic.
They have loads of energy. What you want is for that energy to be channeled appropriately. And when they are not in school, there is no definitive time when they come back to school. It becomes difficult. So again, I believe we have a very responsible people in charge. The Honorable Minister of Education is someone I know. I've interacted with him, even before assumption of office. I believe that he's also come from a background where you don't have this kind of strike.